He bullied the new kid for being poor. He didn't know the kid's dad owned the entire town. The polished surfaces of the opulent boardroom usually reflected only the cool, calculated ambition of those who gathered within its hushed walls, a silent testament to power meticulously hoarded. On this particular day, however, a frantic, nervous energy vibrated through the air, betraying the veneer of control. Cassian Thorne, a man whose bespoke suit seemed to whisper of fortunes casually spent, presided at the head of the gleaming mahogany table. His very posture exuded an entitlement honed since birth, his gaze sweeping over the assembled executives with an almost predatory confidence. Beside him, Viridian Stone, her intelligence as sharp as her impeccably tailored ensemble, clutched a tablet, her face a mask of practiced efficiency, her eyes constantly assessing, always looking for the next strategic advantage. The room was thick with the rich, intoxicating scent of expensive coffee, mingling with the unspoken expectation of a monumental announcement, one that would redefine the future of the vast Thorne empire. A subtle shift in the room's carefully constructed equilibrium occurred. A frail, stooped figure, so easily overlooked among the towering executives and their imposing presence, cleared her throat. It was Agnes, an unassuming old woman who, for weeks, had been a persistent, if largely ignored, fixture in the periphery of their lives. Her wispy gray hair framed a face etched with the lines of age, her threadbare clothes a stark contrast to the surrounding luxury. Yet, despite the cloudiness of years, her eyes held an unsettling intensity, a depth that seemed to pierce through the superficiality of the room. "The game is over," Agnes stated, her voice, usually a soft murmur lost in the corporate hum, resonating with an uncharacteristic steel. The unexpected clarity of her words sliced through the boardroom's din, momentarily silencing the nervous chatter. Cassian Thorne paused, a smirk playing on his lips, an expression of dismissive amusement. He glanced at Viridian, and a shared, derisive chuckle passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of their perceived superiority. "Agnes, darling," he drawled, his tone dripping with condescension, a practiced art born of countless interactions with those he deemed beneath him. "What delightful ramblings are you gracing us with now? Are you lost again? This isn't the senior center, you know." He gestured dismissively to the security guard standing by the door, a silent, imperious instruction to remove the nuisance, to restore the order she had so rudely interrupted. Viridian Stone, ever the pragmatist, offered a saccharine smile that never quite reached her sharp eyes. "Perhaps she's finally ready to accept that generous offer for her dilapidated little apartment, Cassian. No more squatter issues, eh?" Her voice was laced with a patronizing sweetness, the kind reserved for children or the infirm, or indeed, for anyone she considered an easily manipulated pawn. She genuinely believed the old woman was nothing more than a stubborn tenant, a minor inconvenience in the grand, ambitious scheme of their real estate acquisitions, a negligible hurdle in their relentless pursuit of profit. Agnes, however, remained rooted to her spot, an immovable force in the face of their disdain. Her gaze swept slowly over the assembled faces, each one a testament to the insatiable greed and ruthless ambition she had quietly witnessed unfold. A flicker of something, was it pity for their blindness? Or perhaps profound disdain for their moral bankruptcy? Crossed her ancient features. "Oh, it's far more than a dilapidated apartment, my dears," she corrected, her voice now gaining strength, a low, ominous hum that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the imposing building, shaking the carefully constructed illusions of power. "It's everything. And you, Cassian, Viridian, have lost it all." A ripple of uneasy murmur spread through the room, like a sudden chill wind. The executives, sensing an inexplicable shift in the atmosphere, exchanged puzzled glances, their carefully composed expressions beginning to fray. Cassian's confident posture faltered slightly, a barely perceptible tremor of uncertainty running through him, but he quickly recovered, his ingrained arrogance refusing to yield to the preposterousness of the moment. He believed he held all the cards, that this senile old woman was merely hallucinating, a final, desperate attempt to cling to something already lost. He could not, would not, comprehend the monumental edifice of his carefully constructed future crumbling before his very eyes. The irony was exquisite, a bitter vintage that only she, the woman known as Agnes, whose true identity was moments from being unveiled, could fully savor. The journey to this precise moment, to the precipice of a carefully orchestrated reveal, had been long and fraught with a quiet, insidious despair. Elara Vance, the formidable matriarch and reclusive billionaire who had painstakingly built the Thorne empire from scratch, had always prided herself on her acuity, her almost supernatural ability to discern character, to see beyond superficial charm into the true heart of an individual. Yet, in her twilight years, a creeping disillusionment had begun to gnaw at her, a corrosive doubt that threatened to consume her very soul. She had amassed a fortune beyond imagination, a legacy meant to last for generations, but the vision she had held, one built on integrity, compassion, and a genuine desire for progress, seemed to be crumbling beneath the relentless tide of avarice she witnessed in her own kin. Her grandson, Cashin Thorne, stood as the most prominent, most painful example of this decay. From a tender age, Elara had seen the undeniable glint of ambition in his eyes, a spark that could have been harnessed for good. But it was an ambition untempered by empathy, an insatiable hunger fueled by a relentless pursuit of wealth and status above all else. He managed her vast real estate portfolio, a position of immense power and trust, yet Elara had received whispers, then outright complaints, of his increasingly ruthless tactics. Long-term tenants, families who had rented from the Thorne Corporation for generations, whose parents and grandparents had contributed to the very fabric of the communities Elara had helped build, were being evicted for minor infractions, their homes snapped up for redevelopment, their lives uprooted for a marginal increase in profit. Small businesses, the cornerstones of their vibrant communities, were systematically priced out of their leases, replaced by soulless chain stores and generic franchises, stripping the neighborhoods of their unique character. Cashin's inherent ruthlessness was amplified, almost perfected, by his assistant, Viridian Stone. Viridian was a woman whose formidable intelligence was matched only by her calculated coldness, her unshakable belief that human emotion was a weakness to be exploited. She had perfected the art of corporate ruthlessness, advising Cashin on strategies that pushed legal boundaries to their absolute limit, always with an unwavering eye on maximizing profit, regardless of the human cost. Elara had observed Viridian during their infrequent formal meetings, noting the sharp, almost predatory glint in her eyes whenever a new acquisition or a profitable eviction was discussed. It became chillingly clear that Viridian saw people not as individuals with lives, dreams, and inherent worth, but as mere data points, as obstacles to be overcome, or as opportunities to be ruthlessly exploited for financial gain. The final straw, the defining moment that solidified Elara's resolve, had come during a seemingly innocuous family dinner, a rare gathering forced by Elara's insistence, a desperate attempt to reconnect with her estranged family. Cashin, utterly oblivious to his grandmother's keen observation and the quiet despair growing within her, had regaled the table with gleeful tales of his latest victories. He spoke of evicting an elderly couple from their rent-controlled apartment, their home for over 50 years, to convert the building into luxury condos. He boasted loudly about how he had outmaneuvered their legal aid, how he had twisted regulations to his advantage, denying them any meaningful compensation. His laughter, loud, unrepentant, and devoid of any semblance of human compassion, had grated on Elara's ears, a discordant note in the opulent dining room. Viridian, present as his plus one, had merely offered a smirk of approval, a silent, chilling testament to her complete complicity. That night, sleep had utterly evaded Elara. She lay awake in the vast silence of her mansion, the weight of her empire feeling less like a monumental accomplishment and more like a crushing burden, a monument to a twisted ideal. She had built this fortune for her family, for a future where her values of hard work, fairness, and community would prevail, where prosperity would be shared, not hoarded. Instead, it had become a playground for the rapacious, a monument to their unchecked greed. Her trust, once a bedrock upon which her family relations were built, had eroded into fine dust, leaving behind only bitter resentment. How could she, in good conscience, entrust her life's work, her carefully cultivated legacy, to individuals so utterly devoid of compassion, so consumed by self-interest? How could she ensure that her vast wealth would genuinely serve a greater good, rather than simply fuel more exploitation and misery? A radical idea began to form in her mind, a daring, almost theatrical scheme to expose the true nature of those closest to her, to strip away their masks of corporate professionalism and familial deference. She needed to see them without the protective shield of her power, without the deference her name commanded. She needed to become invisible, a nobody, someone utterly without influence, to truly understand the depths of their character, to see if any shred of human decency remained. If they would trample over a helpless old woman, one who appeared to have nothing, then their true colors would be undeniable, their moral bankruptcy laid bare for all to see. The plan was meticulously crafted, honed over weeks of solitary contemplation and quiet despair. Elara Vance, the woman synonymous with power, prestige, and unwavering authority, would vanish. In her place, Agnes, a seemingly destitute, slightly confused elderly woman, would emerge. She consulted with her most trusted, discreet advisors, a private investigator known for his uncanny ability to uncover hidden truths, a former theatrical makeup artist whose skill could create entirely new personas, and a longtime personal assistant who was fiercely loyal and utterly discreet, her silence a sacred vow. The disguise was perfected over several clandestine sessions, each one a step further away from the woman Elara Vance had always been. Her aristocratic posture, usually ramrod straight and commanding, was painstakingly unlearned, replaced by a subtle, almost imperceptible stoop, a hint of weariness in her shoulders. Her elegant silver hair, always immaculately coiffed, was transformed into a wispy, unkempt gray, made to appear neglected. Her wardrobe, once a collection of haute couture tailored to perfection, became a selection of faded, ill-fitting clothes sourced from charity shops, chosen for their anonymity and their ability to convey a sense of hardship. Even her voice, usually crisp, commanding, and resonant with authority, was softened, made to sound a little breathy, a little uncertain, a little less capable. Her hands, once adorned with priceless jewels, were now bare, showing the liver spots of age, the faint tremors that hinted at frailty. She even adopted a slight, persistent cough to complete the illusion of vulnerability, a small detail that grounded the character in reality. Her vast financial affairs were carefully placed in a blind trust, managed by a new, anonymous team of lawyers, with strict instructions to halt all major transactions, especially real estate acquisitions and evictions, until further notice. Her personal security detail, a constant presence for decades, was given a long, paid leave, their absence ensuring her complete anonymity. Her usual residence was temporarily closed, the staff sent on an extended vacation, their questions politely but firmly deflected. She established a false identity, a carefully constructed backstory of a widow who had fallen on hard times, a distant relative who had once worked for the Thorne Corporation decades ago and was now seeking a small, affordable apartment within one of their older, less desirable buildings. This specific detail would give her a legitimate, albeit low priority, reason to interact with Cashin's real estate office, to present herself as a potential tenant, one who could be easily dismissed. The chosen location for her experiment was an aging apartment complex on Elm Street, one of the original Thorne family properties, now managed by Cashin's division. It was deliberately chosen for its slightly dilapidated state, its long-term, working-class tenants, and its reputation for being overlooked by the newer, more profitable ventures. It was a perfect microcosm of the empire she had built, a place where the human element was most visible, most vulnerable, and most easily exploited. Elara Vance, now Agnes, felt a strange, unsettling mix of apprehension and grim determination. She knew this test would be difficult, emotionally taxing, perhaps even heartbreaking. She was prepared to see the worst, to confirm her deepest fears about her family's moral compass, but she clung to a sliver of desperate hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she might find an unexpected glimmer of goodness, a hidden pocket of compassion. It was a final, desperate attempt to reclaim a piece of her faith in humanity, to discover if decency still existed within the shadow of her vast empire. And so, Elara Vance became Agnes, a ghost in her own kingdom, waiting to observe, to judge, and ultimately, to deliver justice. The transformation was complete, and Agnes's life as a supposedly struggling elder began. Her first contact with the Thorne Corporation's real estate division, managed by her grandson Cashin, was orchestrated to appear as a genuine plea for an affordable dwelling, a last resort for a woman on the edge. She presented herself at the sleek, modern offices, a stark, almost painful contrast to her humble appearance. The reception area was all glass and chrome, a monument to corporate power. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly coiffed hair and an air of detached superiority, barely looked up from her computer screen, directing Agnes to a waiting area with a dismissive flick of her perfectly manicured hand, as if swatting away a fly. Agnes waited for nearly 2 hours, observing the bustling office, the hurried pace of transactions, the cold, impersonal efficiency that permeated every interaction. She watched as well-dressed clients were ushered in immediately, while a young family with a crying baby waited just as long as she did. The dehumanization was already evident. Finally, she was granted a brief audience with Viridian Stone, Cashin's right-hand woman, a woman whose every movement bespoke a ruthless precision. Viridian, initially, offered a perfunctory, almost automatic smile, but her eyes quickly assessed Agnes's worn clothes, her stooped posture, the subtle signs of poverty. "Yes, Agnes, is it?" Viridian began, her voice professional but utterly devoid of warmth, a carefully constructed facade. "I understand you're looking for housing. The Thorne Corporation has many properties, of course." She paused, a condescending smirk playing on her lips, a clear indication of the contempt she felt. "However, our affordable units are limited. And in high demand, as you might imagine." Agnes, playing her part perfectly, feigned a slight confusion, a touch of naive hope. "Oh, but I was told by a kind young man at the community center that the Thorne Corporation has a legacy of supporting its long-term residents. My late husband, God rest his soul, used to work for the company, decades ago. He always spoke so highly of Mr. Thorne, the founder." She used Alara's maiden name, a subtle probe. Viridian's smile tightened, her patience visibly thinning. "Times change, Agnes. The market is very competitive now. And quite frankly, our properties are highly sought after. We have very strict criteria." She then proceeded to list exorbitant rents for tiny, run-down apartments, or properties in dangerous neighborhoods, always with a subtle implication that Agnes was too poor, too old, or simply not desirable enough to warrant a decent place. "Perhaps," Viridian suggested, tapping her pen impatiently on her pristine desk, a clear sign of dismissal, "you should look into assisted living facilities. They might be more suitable for someone of your particular needs." The insult was thinly veiled, the message chillingly clear. Agnes was a burden, not a client, a problem to be shunted aside. Alara Vance felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach, a familiar ache of disappointment. This was precisely the kind of callousness she had feared, the exact reason she had embarked on this painful journey. Her interactions with Cashin were even more disheartening, if that was possible. He rarely deigned to speak to her directly, always delegating to Viridian, or if forced into an interaction, delivering short, dismissive sentences, his eyes already elsewhere. One day, Agnes managed to corner him in the opulent lobby of one of his grander buildings, a historic landmark Alara herself had personally restored years ago, pouring her own passion into its preservation. Cashin was on his way to a high-profile meeting, surrounded by a phalanx of assistants, a human shield against any unwanted contact. "Mr. Thorne, sir." Agnes called out, her voice reedy, deliberately made to sound weak. "I just wanted to ask about the repairs in the old building on Elm Street. The heating hasn't been working properly for weeks, and it's getting terribly cold for the tenants." Cashin stopped, his face a mask of annoyance, as if a buzzing fly had interrupted his grand procession. He glanced at her as if she were a piece of lint on his designer jacket, utterly beneath his notice. "Elm Street," he scoffed, turning to Viridian, his tone indicating his absolute disinterest in the welfare of its residents. "Isn't that one of the properties we're planning to redevelop? Why are we still putting money into it? Send them a notice, Viridian. Offer them a pittance to move out." we need that building vacant yesterday. He didn't even wait for a reply, simply strode away, his entourage flowing behind him, leaving Agnes standing alone, her question unanswered, her genuine plight dismissed as a minor accounting inconvenience, a logistical hurdle to be ruthlessly overcome. Alara's heart ached with a profound sadness that threatened to overwhelm her disguise. This was her grandson, casually condemning dozens of families to displacement, to uncertainty, all for the sake of increased profit margins. Agnes purposefully became a problem tenant in one of the older buildings Cashin managed, a residence she herself still owned outright through a carefully constructed subsidiary shell company, a layer of protection against the very greed she was now observing. She would call the office with minor, yet persistent, complaints, a leaky faucet that dripped incessantly, a flickering light that cast eerie shadows, a draft from a window that chilled the room even when the heating was working. Each time, she was met with indifference, delayed responses, or outright rudeness. "Agnes, we've told you, maintenance is backed up," a harried voice would snap over the phone, utterly devoid of sympathy. "You'll just have to wait." Or, worse, they would send a repairman who did a shoddy, temporary fix, clearly instructed to do the bare minimum, to simply patch the problem until the inevitable eviction. Cashin's office even tried to increase her rent several times, citing vague market adjustments, despite her being in a rent-controlled unit that legally protected her from such increases. Each attempt was a subtle test, a push to see how far they would go to exploit her, to force her out. One particularly cold morning, as the chill seeped into the old building's bones, Agnes feigned a minor stumble in the building's unlit staircase, clutching her chest, pretending to be disoriented, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She hoped someone from management might check on her, offer assistance, perhaps call a doctor. Cashin's team was notified. A junior assistant was dispatched, who simply handed her a form to sign, absolving the company of liability, before leaving her to manage the stairs alone, her feigned distress ignored. The message was clear: her well-being was an afterthought, secondary to legal protection and risk management. The bitter irony of her own employees treating her, their ultimate benefactor and the very heart of the corporation, with such utter disregard was a deeply painful pill to swallow. The contrast, however, was stark, a shining beacon in the encroaching darkness, when it came to Silas Finch. Silas, the building superintendent for over 30 years, was a man of quiet dignity and unwavering kindness. He was a man shaped by hard work, by genuine empathy, by a deep understanding of people, a rare beacon in the increasingly cold and transactional world Alara had observed. He knew every resident by name, remembered their stories, their struggles, their small triumphs, and treated each person with respect, regardless of their station or their ability to pay rent. Agnes first encountered Silas when her old, wheezing refrigerator finally gave up the ghost, its final gasp a mournful wheeze. She called the building's general maintenance line, fully expecting the usual bureaucratic runaround, the endless hold music, the indifferent promise of a repairman sometime next week. Instead, within an hour, Silas himself arrived, a toolbox in hand, his face etched with worry lines from years of hard work but his eyes warm and genuinely concerned. "Agnes, is it?" he asked, his voice gentle, his tone immediately putting her at ease. "I heard your fridge was on the fritz. Don't you worry, we'll get you sorted." He worked diligently, humming softly to himself, explaining the problem in simple, understandable terms. When he realized the fridge was beyond repair, too old and too broken to salvage, he didn't shrug and tell her to wait for a new one to be ordered through corporate channels, a process that could take weeks, leaving her food to spoil. Instead, he pulled out his own well-worn phone, its screen cracked from countless drops. "I know a guy," he said, a small, hopeful smile appearing on his face. "Got a good used one in his garage, just sitting there. I'll run down and pick it up for you, get it installed today. Can't have your food spoiling, not in this heat, can we?" Agnes watched him go, a lump forming in her throat, a sudden welling of emotion she hadn't anticipated. Silas had used his own time, his own connections, and likely his own money for the gas, to help her, a seemingly anonymous old woman. He returned within hours, the used refrigerator surprisingly clean and functional, a testament to his resourcefulness. He didn't ask for payment, or even a thank you beyond a quiet nod, his only reward the satisfaction of a job well done and a person helped. Another time, Agnes was struggling with her groceries, a heavy bag of cans threatening to tear through the thin plastic. She was walking slowly, deliberately, mimicking the fragility of advanced age, her steps small and hesitant. Cashin's sleek black car, driven by his uniformed chauffeur, glided past her without so much as a glance, a blur of expensive metal and utter indifference. A few minutes later, Silas, returning from a repair job, spotted her. He pulled over his own beat-up pickup truck, its paint peeling, its engine rumbling like a tired beast. "Agnes, let me help you with that," he offered immediately, without hesitation, his voice warm and genuine. He took the bags from her, his strong, calloused hands easily managing the weight that had been a struggle for her. He walked her all the way to her apartment door, chatting pleasantly about the weather, asking if she needed anything else, his presence comforting and unassuming. He didn't pity her, he simply helped, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, an automatic response to human need. He even noticed a loose floorboard in her hallway, a small detail that no one from Cashin's management team would ever have noticed, let alone cared about, and made a mental note to fix it on his next round. One particularly trying week, as the emotional toll of her disguise began to wear on her, Agnes feigned illness, missing her usual walks around the building. Silas, noticing her absence, knocked on her door later that day, a worried frown on his face. "Agnes, are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine concern, his eyes searching hers for any sign of distress. "Haven't seen you around. Just wanted to check in." He brought her a small container of homemade chicken soup, its warmth radiating through the plastic, a simple, comforting gesture that spoke volumes about his character. "My wife made too much," he lied kindly, knowing that accepting charity could be hard for some, respecting her pride even in her perceived destitution. Alara Vance, observing from behind Agnes's weary eyes, saw the stark dichotomy laid bare. On one side, the calculating indifference and active exploitation from her own flesh and blood, from those she had entrusted with her most cherished legacy. On the other, the quiet, unassuming decency of a man who had nothing to gain, a man who saw a fellow human being in need and simply acted with pure, unadulterated compassion. Silas's kindness wasn't loud or performative, it was woven into the very fabric of his being, a stark, shining contrast to the emptiness, the moral vacuum, she found in Cashin and Viridian. The test had yielded its results, clearer and more painful than she could have ever imagined. The time for the mask to fall was rapidly approaching. The day of the grand unveiling had arrived, a day Alara Vance had meticulously planned to coincide with the annual Thorne Corporation shareholder meeting, a carefully selected stage for her dramatic reveal, a place where the full weight of her authority could be brought to bear. The atmosphere in the opulent boardroom was tense, thick with anticipation, a palpable hum of expectation. Cashin Thorne, radiating a false confidence, stood at the podium, delivering a glossy, meticulously prepared presentation on the company's latest acquisitions and projected profits. Viridian Stone stood beside him, her face impassive, her eyes darting between her tablet and the board members, occasionally interjecting with a sharp, calculated remark designed to reinforce Cashin's position. They were presenting their vision for the future, a future they believed was entirely theirs to command, built on the foundations of their ruthlessness. As Cashin was nearing the end of his address, detailing plans for a massive new development that involved the demolition of several older, long-term residential buildings, including the very one Agnes lived in, the complex on Elm Street, the heavy oak doors at the back of the boardroom swung open. All heads turned, expecting perhaps a late-arriving executive, or a new legal counsel. The sudden interruption caused a ripple of annoyance. Instead, a striking figure entered. She was an elderly woman, but unlike the stooped, frail Agnes, this woman moved with an undeniable grace and power that seemed to fill the vast room. Her silver hair, once wispy and unkempt, was now meticulously styled, gleaming under the chandeliers like spun moonlight. Her simple, worn clothes were replaced by an impeccably tailored navy suit that exuded quiet authority, its lines sharp and precise. Her eyes, no longer clouded with age or feigned confusion, sparkled with a piercing intelligence that seemed to see into the very souls of those present, laying them bare. Beside her, a tall, stern man in a dark suit, carrying a heavy leather briefcase, followed closely. This was Mr. Albright, Alara Vance's most trusted, and notoriously discreet, legal counsel, a man whose reputation alone commanded unwavering respect. A ripple of confusion, then dawning recognition, spread through the room like wildfire. Whispers broke out, hushed but urgent. "Is that Alara Vance?" someone murmured, barely audible, as if speaking her name aloud might break a spell. Cashin's smooth monologue faltered, his practiced confidence dissolving. His eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock and fear replacing his carefully cultivated composure. Viridian, ever analytical, quickly scanned the woman's features, then looked back at Cashin, a dawning horror creeping into her expression, her usually unflappable facade cracking. Alara Vance, without uttering a word, walked deliberately towards the head of the table, her every step resonating with an unspoken command, a silent assertion of her undeniable authority. The executives, caught off guard, instinctively parted before her, an unconscious deference to true power. She stopped directly in front of Cashin and Viridian, her gaze sweeping over their stunned, pale faces. "Cashin," she said, her voice clear and resonant, completely devoid of the reedy uncertainty that had characterized Agnes. The familiar timbre, now unmasked, filled the room. "Viridian." Her voice was like a bell, sharp and true, cutting through the stunned silence that had fallen over the boardroom. "It seems you've forgotten your manners." Cashin, still reeling, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible reality before him, managed to stammer, "Grandmother? What are you doing here? We thought you were indisposed. Your office said you were on a sabbatical, recovering." He glanced nervously at Viridian, who was now visibly pale, her perfect composure utterly shattered. Alara offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile, one that didn't reach her piercing eyes. "Indisposed? Oh, I was very much disposed, Cashin. Disposed to observe. To learn. To truly see what kind of legacy you were building for me, for this company, for the people who rely on it." She then turned to the assembled board members, her voice gaining strength, filling the room with an undeniable authority. "For the past few months, I have been living among you. Not as Alara Vance, your matriarch, your benefactor, your revered founder, but as Agnes. A simple, elderly woman, a tenant in one of your oldest properties, struggling to make ends meet, to find a place in a world that seems to have forgotten her." A collective gasp swept through the room, a wave of stunned disbelief. Cashin's jaw dropped, his face a mask of utter devastation. Viridian's tablet slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the polished floor, the sound shockingly loud in the sudden silence. The revelation hung heavy in the air, a truth so shocking, so audacious, that it defied belief, rewriting every assumption they had made. "I have called your offices," Alara continued, her eyes fixed on Cashin, then Viridian, her gaze unwavering, condemning. "Pleaded for repairs, struggled with my groceries, even feigned illness to see if anyone at all, would show a shred of human decency, a flicker of compassion." Her gaze lingered on Cashin, a cold, hard judgment in her eyes. "You, Cashin, dismissed me as a nuisance, a senile old woman holding up your precious redevelopment plans. You tried to evict me, to raise my rent, to force me out of my home, a home I, Alara Vance, personally own, a place I purchased decades ago to house my first employees." Cashin stammered, desperation entering his voice. "Grandmother, no, that's a misunderstanding. We didn't know it was you. We would never, if we had known." Alara cut him off with a raised hand, her voice icy, unyielding. "That is precisely the point, Cashin. You didn't know. And because you didn't know, you treated an elderly, vulnerable woman with utter contempt. You saw only a number on a ledger, an obstacle to be removed, a means to an end. You were devoid of empathy, utterly consumed by your own greed, by the lust for power and profit. She turned her gaze to Viridian, her voice laced with an almost surgical precision. And you, Miss Stone, were his willing accomplice, advocating for ruthless tactics, reveling in the exploitation, charting the course for the misery you inflicted. Viridian, for the first time in her meticulously controlled life, seemed truly speechless, her face a mask of abject horror, her mind racing, searching for an escape that didn't exist. She could see her meticulously crafted career, her entire future, her very identity, crumbling before her eyes, reduced to dust by the woman she had so casually dismissed as an inconvenience. My attorney, Mr. Albright, is here to ensure that justice is served, Alara declared, her voice ringing with absolute finality, leaving no room for doubt or appeal. This corporation, my legacy, will not be built on the bones of the vulnerable, on the suffering of hard-working families. It will not be run by those who prioritize profit over people, who value numbers above humanity. Her eyes, once filled with a quiet sadness that had been masked by Agnes's frailty, now blazed with the cold fury of a matriarch betrayed. The masks had fallen, and the true faces of power, greed, and surprising, quiet compassion were finally revealed for all to see. The aftermath of Alara Vance's thunderous revelation was swift and brutal, a corporate earthquake that sent shockwaves through the entire Thorne empire, shattering its carefully constructed facade. Cassian Thorne, once the arrogant heir apparent, now stood pale and trembling, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. He attempted a pathetic plea, his voice cracking, reduced to a desperate whimper. "Grandmother, please, I can explain. It was a mistake. I swear, I'll change. I'll do anything you ask." He was a broken man, stripped of all pretense. But Alara Vance was unmoved, her face a mask of cold resolve, her heart hardened by weeks of witnessing his callousness. She had seen him in his true colors, stripped bare of pretense, and the image was indelible, impossible to erase. "There is nothing to explain, Cassian," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion, each word a hammer blow. "Your actions spoke volumes. You betrayed my trust, disgraced my name, and, most importantly, harmed innocent people in pursuit of your own selfish gain." Mr. Albright, a man whose presence alone commanded respect, stepped forward, his expression unyielding. His voice was calm, but each word was a precisely aimed hammer blow, delivering the final, crushing verdict. "Effective immediately, Mr. Thorne, your employment with Thorne Corporation is terminated. All your corporate assets, including shares, bonuses, and severance packages, are hereby frozen pending a full investigation into your management practices. Furthermore, due to multiple documented instances of negligence, attempted fraud, and unethical conduct, as uncovered during Ms. Vance's recent observations, the Thorne Family Trust will be pursuing legal action for gross misconduct and damages." Cassian's face drained of all color, becoming ashen. His carefully cultivated fortune, his luxurious lifestyle, his very identity as a powerful scion, were vanishing before his eyes, spiraling into an abyss. He stumbled back, clutching at the table for support, a truly broken man, his empire shattered. The executives in the room, terrified of being implicated or simply caught in the fallout, averted their gazes, silently grateful it wasn't them, a shiver running down their spines at the matriarch's formidable power. Viridian Stone fared no better. Her calculating mind, usually so quick to devise an escape route or a strategic countermove, was utterly blank, frozen in disbelief. Alara turned to her, her eyes holding a particular disdain, a deep disappointment. "And you, Miss Stone? Your efficiency was commendable, your ruthlessness, chilling. You were not merely an assistant, you were an architect of their suffering, a willing participant in the exploitation, a true believer in the pursuit of profit above all else." Mr. Albright continued, his voice precise and unyielding, delivering the coup de grace. "Miss Stone, your contract is also terminated with immediate effect. Given your active participation in documented unethical practices, the Thorne Corporation will ensure that your professional reputation precedes you. You will find it exceedingly difficult to secure employment in this industry, or indeed, any industry that values integrity." Viridian gasped, a raw, desperate sound, her carefully constructed composure finally crumbling, revealing the terror beneath. She had worked her entire life to climb the corporate ladder, to achieve power and wealth, sacrificing personal relationships for professional gain. Now, in a single, devastating moment, she had lost everything. The doors of opportunity had slammed shut, locked by the matriarch she had so casually dismissed, leaving her stranded in the ruins of her ambition. While the hammer of justice fell upon the culpable, a different kind of shock, one of profound grace, was about to be delivered to Silas Finch. He had been quietly summoned to the boardroom, utterly bewildered, believing he was needed to fix a faulty projector or a temperamental thermostat. He stood awkwardly by the door, still in his work clothes, a wrench forgotten in his hand, his eyes wide with confusion, as Alara Vance, now known to him as Agnes, concluded her devastating pronouncements. He recognized the old woman from Elm Street, but the transformation was, "You fixed my refrigerator when no one else would," Alara continued, a hint of emotion in her voice, a slight catch that conveyed the depth of her gratitude. "You carried my groceries when I struggled. You brought me soup when you thought I was ill, without expecting anything in return. You never asked for payment, or even a thank you beyond a quiet nod. You simply cared." She paused, her eyes welling up slightly, a rare display of vulnerability. "You represent the very best of what I hoped my company, my legacy, would embody: humanity, honesty, and genuine service." She turned to Mr. Albright, who, with an almost theatrical flourish, opened his heavy leather briefcase and produced a thick set of documents. "Mr. Albright, please inform Silas of his new role." Mr. Albright cleared his throat, his usually stoic face betraying a hint of a smile. "Mr. Finch, Ms. Vance has made a decision. Effective immediately, you are appointed as the new head of property management for all Thorn Corporation residential properties. Your immediate task will be to review every tenant complaint, rectify all outstanding issues, and ensure that every resident is treated with dignity and respect, as Ms. Vance intended when she founded this company. Furthermore," he paused, allowing the weight of the next announcement to settle, "Ms. Vance has personally purchased the entire Elm Street apartment complex, where you have worked for so long. It is now entirely debt-free, a property freed from the cycle of exploitation. You, Mr. Finch, will be given full ownership of that building, to manage as you see fit, as a new, independent entity. And to ensure you have the resources to begin this new venture, a trust fund of $5 million has been established in your name, with a clear mandate for the continued well-being of the residents, for its upkeep and for community services." Silas Finch stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief, his jaw hanging slack. He, a humble superintendent, was now a property owner, a manager of an entire division within a powerful corporation, and a multimillionaire? It was a fantasy, a dream too outlandish to comprehend. He looked from Alara to Mr. Albright, then back, tears beginning to stream freely down his weathered cheeks, tears of overwhelming shock and gratitude. "Ma'am. Agnes. I don't know what to say." Alara Vance extended her hand, taking his rough, calloused one, a gesture of profound respect and genuine affection. "Say nothing, Silas. Just continue to be the good man you are. You have earned this, and so much more." The reward, for Silas, was not just financial, it was the profound validation of a lifetime of quiet decency, a testament to the belief that true wealth lies not in what one accumulates, but in the kindness one distributes, in the human connections one fosters. Months passed, and the Thorn Corporation underwent a profound metamorphosis under Alara Vance's direct, watchful eye. With Cashin and Viridian's ruthless influence purged, their corrupt practices rooted out, a new era of ethical business practices was ushered in. Alara, though still formidable and wise, was no longer a reclusive figure, hiding behind the walls of her estate. She actively oversaw the transition, ensuring that the company's new policies prioritized tenant welfare, fostered genuine community engagement, and upheld fair dealings in every transaction. The company began to rebuild its reputation, piece by painstaking piece, reclaiming the values upon which it was originally founded, values that had been almost lost to greed. Alara Vance, now a little less burdened by the weight of her legacy, found a quiet, profound peace in her twilight years. She had faced her deepest fears, confronted the betrayal within her own family, and, in doing so, had discovered an unexpected wellspring of hope in the most unlikely of places. She often visited the Elm Street complex, no longer disguised, but as the revered owner, observing with deep satisfaction the thriving community Silas Finch had cultivated, a testament to his compassion. Silas, for his part, had embraced his new role with the same humble dedication and unwavering integrity he had always possessed. The Elm Street building, now under his direct ownership, flourished. He personally oversaw repairs, implemented fair rent policies that protected long-term tenants, and fostered a genuine sense of community among the residents, organizing events and creating shared spaces. The $5 million was not squandered, it was invested wisely, creating a reserve for continuous building improvements, a fund for struggling tenants facing unforeseen hardship, and even a small community center for the residents, a place for gathering and support. He continued to be the same kind, approachable man, often seen carrying groceries for an elderly resident or helping a struggling family with a maintenance issue, just as he had for Agnes. He had found his true calling, not as a superintendent, but as a compassionate steward of a community, his greatest joy derived from the well-being of his residents. He lived comfortably, but never ostentatiously, his simple dignity unchanged by his newfound wealth. Cashinthorn and Viridian Stone, stripped of their power and wealth, faded into obscurity, their names now synonymous with disgrace in the corporate world. The once bright promise of their careers extinguished, their ambitions turned to ash, they learned, in the harshest possible way, that the pursuit of selfish gain, unmoored from integrity and human compassion, ultimately leads to ruin, to an empty existence. Their fall was a cautionary tale whispered in the hallowed halls of corporate power, a stark reminder that true success is not merely measured by balance sheets and profit margins, but by the ethical compass one wields, by the impact one has on the lives of others. The story of Alara Vance and her audacious test became a legend within the Thorne Corporation, a testament to the matriarch's enduring wisdom and her unwavering commitment to justice. It taught a timeless lesson that resonated far beyond the confines of the boardroom. Character is not revealed in the light of prosperity and power, but in the crucible of adversity. It is in the way one treats those perceived to have nothing, those from whom no gain can be extracted, that the true measure of a person's soul is found. And in a world often blinded by superficial trappings, it is the quiet, unassuming acts of kindness, performed without expectation of reward, that ultimately shine the brightest and truly illuminate the path to a meaningful, enduring legacy. If this powerful tale of hidden identities, unexpected kindness, and deserved justice resonated with you, you're in the right place. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you more stories just like this, where the true nature of humanity is put to the ultimate test. Don't miss out on our next compelling narrative. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new story drops. Now, we want to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of Alara Vance's reveal? If you were in Agnes's shoes, would you have been as patient? And what do you think was the most important lesson Silas Finch taught everyone through his actions? Share your thoughts in the comments below, we love reading what you think.